right, here we go. All right, so yes, I
Yes.
love this. I love it. Okay, so this episode, we're having our very special guest
Mm,
here, Brickciti Buddha,
mm, mm.
aka Dox Diggla, in the
In the
building,
building.
all the way
Diggler.
from Newark,
Yes.
New Jersey,
Yes.
all the way
Bricks. What
across
up?
the country.
Yes.
Yes, yes, I love it. I'm so happy you're here. So honored. I stalked you on IG for a minute. I have to admit.
No doubt.
And then I finally like got that moment to
Mm.
ask you, casting you agreed, and I'm so honored that you're here. Yes.
Likewise, and I'm thankful for your patience because my schedule be crazy sometimes, and it's
But
never a matter of me being Hollywood. I just know at this point in my journey, everything happens when it's meant, and we was
right.
meant to be right now. Right. When Newark is 80 degrees and the desert is 40 degrees where you at, but this was the time, so we lit. I'm happy to be here.
Right. I have my comfy,
Yeah,
clothes on and you look like summertime.
exactly. Except for the Scully. Except for the Scully.
Yeah, but I'm just happy to have somebody like you who's actually, walking the walk
Mm-hmm.
and in the community, in the trenches, you know what I mean? And just with the people and really helping people. Um, Tell us like about your service that you do.
Yeah, so I'm an artist, meditation teacher. Right now, I'm actually probably more known as a meditation teacher because I've been out of music for a minute
Mhm.
until I dropped the album. But I'm an artist, meditation teacher, counselor, community event planner, activist, life coach, all different types of stuff. And like initially, I didn't plan on doing any of this. Like it's just funny how life takes its own course. My activism button got pushed initially when like Trayvon Martin went down. And like I've always been aware of the fight, the struggle, Black
Mhm.
history. And I used to have to read all these different Black history books when I was young during February. Like my parents loaded me up, so I had the knowledge. Um, but my solar plexus chakra wasn't activated. The action that came with the knowledge wasn't activated until he went down. And like how he looks reminded me of how I looked when I was young, and there was something in just like the visceral expression of seeing his face and hearing that story that just turned my a switch on in me. And a friend of mine, one of my OGs, Wayne Stackhouse, he was a preacher. He's the head preacher of a church at that time, also a principal, and he was the only person I knew that had like access to the community that I respected, and I didn't know what to do with that energy, so I just went and had a conversation with him one day, and we started a nonprofit called first it was Block by Block, and then it was Just Do
Mhm.
Something, and that was a teachable moment too because we get gung ho when something like this happens, and you try to get people together, and they come to the first meeting, they come to the second, and then by the fifth nobody's around. So that's kind of what happened with Block by Block. But I just
Mm.
kept at it, and eventually we formed Just Do Something. That turned into us having like a good maybe 1 or 2 year run in the community. We did a lot of different events, got a lot of traction going, and then that kind of fell off. And I started to realize that people are not really going to show up outside of being reactionary without starting to tap into themselves first, without starting to do the inner work. They'll do it in spots. They'll be motivated when the news says such and such mowed down, but after a couple of days, it just fades away. So I started to realize that's where I needed to shift my attention to, and that's when meditation education, my company now started to be formed.
Mm.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's a lot. I was reading your bio on your website,
Mm-hmm.
brickcitibuddha.com.
Mm-hmm.
And what I thought was really interesting was that like you kind of started out in the church, right?
Yeah.
And then you went away
Yeah.
from the church and then you kind of went back to the church and then so like your foundation, do you feel like that's kind of like help you with a spiritual foundation in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. I talk to my mom all the time, and it's crazy because I used to get beat over the head with Christianity. And when I like left the church, I was the black sheep of the family in the community that I knew. I knew my church people and my little street homies or whatever. And as I started to transition more into that, because I just wasn't believing how Christianity was being taught. It was a period where my family wasn't rocking with me. The people that I knew and loved wasn't rocking. Like they kind of just turned their back on me because I didn't believe what they believed. So I learned a lot about humanity at that time. I learned a lot about the fickle nature of loyalty at that time. But coming like full circle, I realized I needed that foundation. Um, Watching my father get up 3 o'clock in the morning. He was still going to school. He was the manager of a radiology department at Cabrini Medical Center in Manhattan. So he was lit, right? But every morning I would get up, go to the P or something, and 3 o'clock in the morning he would be sitting there at the table highlighting in his Bible every single morning for as long as I was in his house, 20 some odd years. Still to this day he does that. I watched my mom like pray religiously for everybody, right? So even when I started to venture off into different modalities, I still had to appreciate the Christ consciousness that I downloaded being in the church. And it was outside of the text or Jesus, the person is Lord and all that. It was about having love for everybody. That system was downloaded into my consciousness via my experience with Christianity. So I always tell my mother, she meditates now. All the things she used to be over the head with, she's now incorporating, even questioning some things about how Jesus was taught to her. Like her consciousness is expanding, just watching my journey. So sometimes she'll kind of apologize that she didn't give me all these things I had to go fight for myself. And I tell her, you gave me exactly what I needed. You gave me my foundation. So I'm grateful to I'm in the church and Christianity for that. Yeah.
That's profound too.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like look in a bigger, a more expansive way. It's about consciousness.
Exactly.
As opposed to like the man, or the stories, but the stories have realness in them, Yeah. But yeah, so that kind of like, to me, is interesting about your story because, a lot of us do start off in church, and then you have these questions and you're, and people don't want you to question things, and then you kind of have to find your own way. And, everybody has to find their own way.
Right.
But you said in your bio too, that you were reluctant, but obedient.
Yeah.
And that right there.
Damn, I said that? That's slick.
Yeah.
I wrote that so long ago.
Okay, you said it. I was like, oh, that's a good. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like you were reluctant. You were doing you was, whatever you were doing at the time, but you got this, order, you said, from spirit to do something else.
Right.
And so, like, what really made you do that? Because, I mean, we don't like to listen.
Facts. I encapsulated with when I went to this spiritual retreat in Florida. That was like steroids for my soul at that. My initiator, because everybody is a guru. So I don't differentiate. This is a guru. Everybody's a guru. Guru is somebody or something that exposes the darkness or the light in consciousness, whatever side of the pole they may be on. Somebody that cheated on you, somebody that saved your life, they all showing you more of how consciousness works. So I say my initiator into yoga and meditation, Honors Yoga, who is another beautiful black brother, has his own platform, extremely dope platform. We was actually in a music group together way before any of this. And he left the group when we had money on the table. We had deals on the table. We was about to be like one of the hip hop super groups in the East Coast. And he was compelled to start his journey to start his platform then. And we was mad at him for a long time. We didn't get it. But he was actually the person that I reconnected with when I was suicidal and just very transparent online and Facebook. And he reached out to me and he offered me a free 5-week course. Like, I'm gonna throw this to you for free off the strength. And that just revolutionized everything. And we started to develop like a community just online, people from all around the world that took his course. And he ended up having an actual retreat. I didn't have the money to go. I was still coming off disability, still like half blind and all this other stuff. But people I had never met paid for my flight, paid for me to come, gave me pocket money while I was there. This is like maybe $2,000-$3,000 expense.
Wow.
So, and then I wasn't sure if I felt safe to go. Like, I knew I wanted to go. Something in me told me I needed to be there. But I'm like, bro, this could be a cult. They could chop me up and put me in the stool. I don't know what's really about to happen. Like, I ain't seen my man in 10 years. I was just letting it go because I felt like I wasn't worthy. I felt like I didn't know enough. And at this time, like, I was extremely deep into my practice. I would spend hours alone in the forest, like kid from New Jersey, just in a completely different frequency. So the last day of the 3-day retreat, intensive, 4 in the morning to like 2, 3 in the morning, sleep for an hour, go right back at it again. The last thing we did was a fire ritual. And the practitioner had us write down 5 things we felt were blocking us from the next level of ourselves. And, I felt great. My spirit was open, but I didn't think nothing of it until we went out there and threw it in the fire. And I literally watched the fire burn the paper, and I felt that version of myself completely disintegrate. I hadn't cried in like years. I cried for like an hour, to the point like the women that was there had to like just rock me and console me, snot bubbles, ugly cry. And when that finally dissipated, there was a clarity of mind. And I started to hear stories from a lot of the women when we came back in that talked about sexual abuse. And it's women from all over the world, India, Chicago, New York, LA. And they started to talk about sexual abuse. And something in me was like, yo, you're supposed to like be a beacon of hope for these women that not all of us on some fuck shit. And then the other thing was, when you go back home, you got to start doing classes. And I even ignored that for like another month. But it just got to the point, it like my literally ringing started to happen in my ears. It got to the point where I thought I had tinnitus, which is ringing in the ears. A lot of times that's deeper levels of spirit trying to communicate with you. And when I realized that's what it was, I said, okay. And I went and did my first class. One person showed up. And by the end of that summer, I had like 50, 60 people in my community already. Now we thousands of people deep all over the world at this point.